A quick thank you to the T5 peeps, Bob the Dragon, Datamagnet, Cat Crab Lobster, DuckMachine, Astraya the Dreamer, Mezec, Feudic Jarl, Casper Arnholtz, and Chaos to Mist. Thank you very much. Story number 1. Project Kennel, written by Eddie. Most species have a section of their existence where they attempt to uplift any and all creatures around them, pets, prey, and even sometimes predator creatures in an attempt to gain companionship from a creature that is not of their species. This is often catastrophic and regularly results in the destruction of one species and the birth of another. Humans, however, decided to take an utterly different approach. They skipped the uplift process, instead deciding to directly go for creating a unique species. A lot were critical failures. The GEC agreement and the huge panoply of demi-human species that now exist across the galaxy are testament to that. There were, however, several lessons humans took away from this. Their own gene structure is very robust, at least when it comes to minor modifications. Enhanced eyesight, alternative ear structure, and a return to previously vestigial appendage and dozens of other minor enhancements allowed for the creation of new human species. Homo sapiens Astra. Though the fact that the species was just a slightly changed version of humanity allowed for all humans to still interbreed. The other thing that's important is that humans have companion species reaching into the hundreds. They will domesticate anything, and I mean anything. There are reports of human domesticating creatures that have been considered untamable by the local species for centuries, as well as breeding those creatures to use for companionship or work. Every species in the galaxy has something it's good at. Humans are the galaxy's packmasters and trainers. If you need to fly, get a rune. If you need to swim, get an Orcs. If you want a friend, find a human. Or so the saying goes. There are plenty of stories to illustrate this. I'll not go into them here. Most species assumed this was the end of it. Humanity has tamed and trained anything that was intelligent enough to tame and train. Then came the beginning of Project Kennel. We were wrong. Humanity decided that just like how they changed their own genetic structure, they would change that of their companion creatures. Several worlds were dedicated to this project. It was no uplift project, and there was no intent on creating another sapient species. Rather, this project's objective was to allow for the companion creatures to live alongside them for longer, or help them better, or simply to satisfy a human's desire for a specific creature. The first the galaxy heard about this project was when the humans deployed the military group Fenra. Fast attack groups were all well-established thing within the galactic combat, either in space or ground combat. These groups always used some kind of light vehicle or similar, often making them vulnerable to the constraints of such vehicles, the need for fuel, and the noise that they produced. Fenra, however, did not use vehicles. Rather, they were the first use of Project Kennel's genetic manipulations and cybernetic enhancement process. The humans had taken their canine companions and rebuilt them. These friendly and fluffy quadrupeds were once apex hunters on the humans' home planet. Humans, however, had captured, tamed, and bred them for centuries to the point where a number of the species of this canine were as numerous as there were types of human. They had been with humans so long that they were codependent on a genetic level. Project Kennel had taken all of that and reawoken the ancient hunting instincts and predatory natures of these creatures, increasing their size and power as well. These creatures were then augmented and enhanced. One would assume that such creatures would be impossible to control, but once the humans proved that they were more than capable of training anything. Supposedly, raised by one human from a young age, these canine hunters bonded with their human. Each squad was a pack. Their commander, the alpha of that pack. Let loose on the forest world of Gria, these Fenra squads were terrors upon the field. The animals they rode were as tough as tanks and several times as fast. Their riders were as skilled as any human soldiers could be, and devoted to their animals, who were in turn devoted to the pack. After this display of what Project Kennel could do, there was a sudden eruption of other creatures across all of humanity. It was clear that now the cat was out of the bag, so to speak, that the secret no longer needed to be kept. Canines large enough to ride were commonplace amongst human families, while work animals were made stronger and more robust to make their lives easier and take on more work. There were companions made that could survive the void to aid in space rescue and recovery. Creatures that could smell moods and aid in avoiding and recovering from mental illness and trauma were produced. After a few years, these kennel creatures became common all across the galaxy. The most popular and commonplace, though, was not any of the extremely odd creatures or ones with huge changes, but rather ones that would live as long as the average age of their owner's species. The Project Kennel became more than just a scientific research institute, but also one of the most profitable businesses. When interviewed and asked why he'd started all of this, the head project and the lead researcher pointed at a cat that was more machine than animal and seemed to be sleeping on the heater in the room. "I never wanted anyone else to have to feel like I felt when Mr. Fluffles was supposed to be put to sleep," he said. The cat, the source of this galaxy-changing project, the reason for which the entire galaxy now had specialized companion animals, simply rolled over to get an even heat across its body and ignored everything going on around it. End of story. Story number 2, Archangel Station, written by Warp Mind. The humans have invited us all to a tour of their newest, greatest hope for interstellar peacekeeping, the Archangel Station. I have concerns, of course, that this is a purely militaristic power grab, but the invite was for representatives to see the station, and it seems most of the present species have been prudent in choosing representatives, none of high rank, mostly mid to low-level bureaucrats and functionaries. People with insignificant value, negligible as hostages. Lucky me, I drew the green chit. We disembarked from our sorted shuttles. The shuttle bay was impressive, to say the least. 8,000 wingspan wide and at least 300 wingspan tall. A great number of shuttles could take off and land here at once, though this was clearly designed for short-term occupancy. The human representative, a lanky female nearly 2 wingspans tall, bared her teeth as she approached the rest of us. Several of the others were reasonably unsettled by this, but I recall that the showing of teeth was a sign of pleasure in humans, not necessarily hostility. "Welcome, gentle beings, to Archangel Station. I am Gabriella Harker, the station's XO. If I may begin the grand tour, we will stop for refreshments along the way." Several of the other representatives calmed down and gave various gestures of approval, and Harker nodded and continued, gesturing around her. "This here is Gabriel Bay, set up to facilitate couriers, merchants, and passenger shuttles for quick exchanges. Every vessel coming in is swiftly scanned for contraband, and nothing gets past our security forces unchallenged." She looked down at a small computer on her forearm. "On that note, I appreciate that those of you who rely on assorted, stimulating modifications and the like refrain from bringing them off the shuttles. We largely don't care what you have on board your craft, so long as you don't try and bring anything illegal onto the station itself." Several of my colleagues looked briefly bashful, then caught themselves. An enlightened and unsettling detail, if she spoke the truth, and just as unsettling if it was a bluff or a lucky guess. I filed this thought away and absent-mindedly brushed the feather back into place as she led the way from the landing bay and into the impressively efficient entrance hall, with clear paths marked on the floor for arrivals and departures. Gentle beings, there's little exciting to say about a transit hall. ID checkpoints and customs officers, as well as guards on duty to ensure safety and direct visitors to the right parts of the station. If you'll follow me this way. She led us down a corridor to an extensive medical wing, clearly ready to handle hundreds, even thousands of casualties on short notice. Through a large transparent door, we could see a somewhat smaller hangar than Gabriel Bay, full of search and rescue craft, at least a third of which seemed to be powering up and idling. This is Raphael Bay, medical facilities and rescue operations. We're not yet fully staffed, but once we are, we'll be able to send aid to a star system scale disaster areas throughout roughly a third of the galaxy on a few minutes' notice. While we hope we won't need to operate at capacity, we're ready to jump out should you call for our assistance. Several of my colleagues gaped in awe at the magnificence of this place. I had to admit, it was quite impressive. Not just the sheer scope of the facilities, but how they were completely casual about the fuel expenses for such a large fleet of craft running hot on standby at all times. The humans were serious about their, humanitarianism, it seemed. Or it was an even bigger ruse. I had a sinking feeling it wasn't, that they were sincere about it. And I didn't know which alternative was scarier. And moving on to the next section, we're entering Uriel Bay, which is the station's maintenance department. It may be the least glorious, but the staff working here are the sentinels that maintain the barriers between us and the void outside. Plus, this is where the entire station supplies come in, so security here is even tighter than in Gabriel Bay. I cast a glance at an old human leaning on a broom. He smiled and winked at me. Oddly enough, it seemed no one else noticed him. Harker had led us almost into a full cycle around the station, when she briefly froze and looked at a wrist computer, and turned and shouted, "Everyone, dive dramatically to the right, now!" As she threw herself to the floor, most of the others hesitated for only an instant before following suit, and everyone crashed down in assorted, more or less diplomatic piles on the floor as plexiglass doors shattered and a gout of flame licked into the corridors. A loud series of explosions shaking the floor, and the roar of flames was almost deafening. Then silence returned, and a few frightened whimpers came from my colleagues as Harker slowly got to her feet and looked down at the passage where the detonations came from. As we got up, she turned and smiled thinly at us. My apologies. I feel we'll have to skip the military wing for now and head straight for refreshments. The commander is waiting at an ambassadorial food court. If you'll be so kind as to follow me." I brushed off a few specks of soot and saw the old man with the broom again as he headed towards the military area. Officer Harker, if the military area just exploded, should we not be evacuating? If there is an attack or structural damage?" She shook her head and let out an odd chuckle. No, there's no structural damage or attackers. The Michael Bay is just inordinately fond of flashy, dramatic explosions that utterly lack lasting impact. End of story. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed, and if you do, please consider supporting the author, even by popping over and leaving a thumbs up or a nice comment, just to show your appreciation for the story. However, if you wish to support this channel, there are links down below which will help immensely. I will see you all in the next one, and until then, I hope that you have a fantastic day. Cheers.